let's talk a little bit about Nathan Tossy Spivakovsky. I'm sure you've already guessed it that with a name like that, he was a Russian Jew. But it seems that he's been largely forgotten these days. Certainly I hadn't heard of him until recently. I don't know why. When he just came up on a video on YouTube, and then I thought I should look into him a bit more, because he certainly was a great violinist. Had you heard about Tossy Spivakovsky? Anyhow, let's have a look at his biography and go right back to the beginning and look at the events of his life. Nathan Tossy Spivakovsky was born in 1906 in December and died on July the 20th, 1998. So very much a 20th century guy. He was a Jewish, Russian Empire born, German trained violin virtuoso, and he was the youngest of 4 musician brothers, and at one time was considered one of the greatest violinists of the 20th century apparently. But today, as I said, he seems to be mostly forgotten, not mentioned too much anyway. So I think it's good to try and keep the memory of these great violinists alive and draw attention to them and their contribution. Tossy Spivakovsky was born in Odessa, which in 1906 was still part of the Russian Empire. Under the increasing threat of pogroms, his family moved to Berlin, where he studied with Arrigo Serato privately and later with Willy Hess at the Berliner Hochschule für Musik. Seems ironic to move to Berlin to escape a pogrom, but in the early part of the century, of course, it was still safe for Jews. He was a violin prodigy and gave his first recital at age 10, together with his elder brother Jacob, or Yasha, Spivakovsky. Yasha was born in 1896 and died in 1970 and was a renowned concert pianist. Tossy made his first European concert tour at age 13, performing as a soloist with orchestras in a number of countries including Holland, England, Norway, Sweden and Denmark in 1919, where the brothers played for Danish royalty. At only 18, after being talent spotted by Wilhelm Furtwängler, Spivakovsky became the youngest concertmaster hired by the Berlin Philharmonic. 2 years later, he left to pursue a solo career in Europe. During the 1920s, he and his brother Yasha performed together as the Spivakovsky Duo. In 1930, Tossy and Yasha established the highly acclaimed Spivakovsky Kurz Trio together with cellist Edmund Kurz. The trio was on a tour of Australia in 1933 when the Nazi Party took power in Germany, temporarily ending Spivakovsky's European career. As a result, he remained in Melbourne, Australia, and he sent a marriage proposal by telegram to a lovely red-haired girl he had met in Germany, Dr. Erika Lipska, or Zarden, a philologist and Renaissance historian, who sailed to Melbourne in 1934 and became his wife of 63 years. All 3 members of the Spivakovsky Kurz Trio joined the teaching staff of the University of Melbourne Conservatorium of Music. His was an artistic family. The youngest of 9, Spivakovsky belonged to a musical as well as an artistic family. His eldest brother, Simeon, a photographer and sculptor, also produced fine drawings. His brother Albert, a distinguished pianist, also played the cello and conducted orchestras in Germany and Denmark. Another brother, the violinist and cellist Isaac Issy, who had studied violin under Willy Hess and cello with Hugo Becker and Gregor Piatigorsky, also migrated to Australia in 1934 and for 28 years, from 1937 to 1965, taught violin, viola and cello at Scotch Cottage, Melbourne. He was born in 1902 and lived until 1977. Adolf, born in 1891 and who lived to 1958, was a bass baritone, who also migrated to Melbourne in 1934 and taught at the University Conservatorium, where his students included the sopranos Glenda Raymond and Sylvia Fisher. Of Spivakovsky's 3 sisters, Claire, Esphira and Betty, Claire and Betty were said to have had fine singing voices. Tossy's wife taught Spanish at the University of Melbourne from 1936 to 1939. In March 1939, the brothers gave a concert to raise funds for European refugees on behalf of the Jewish Democratic Cultural League. Around 1939-1940, to further his career, Spivakovsky decided to leave Australia with his wife and baby daughter and migrate to the US, where they lived for the rest of their lives. They boarded a ship, the SS Monterey, that was about to make its last Pacific voyage to the US before all civilian traffic got stopped by World War II. After arriving in California, they settled in New York, and in 1940, Spivakovsky made his New York debut at Town Hall. He became concertmaster of the Cleveland Orchestra in 1942 under Artur Rudzinski, in that capacity often performing as soloist. So he was a regular soloist for the Cleveland Orchestra. In 1943, Rudzinski invited him to present the premiere United States performance of Bartók's Violin Concerto No. 2 in Cleveland, Ohio. Spivakovsky subsequently gave this work its first performances in New York and San Francisco. Bartók himself described Spivakovsky's New York performance of his violin concerto as first-rate. His rendition of this concerto, which elicited extraordinary critical acclaim, launched his US career as soloist. According to the critic Alfred Frankenstein, what a name, of the San Francisco Chronicle, Spivakovsky's was the finest violin playing of a generation. The critic Virgil Thomson, who would be so scathing of Heifetz, of the New York Herald Tribune wrote, "Such unfailing nobility of tone, such evenness of coloration through the scale, and most extraordinary of all, such impeccable pitch left one a little gasping." I don't really know why I cite Virgil Thomson, as I consider him an idiot after his likening Heifetz playing to silken underwear, but nevertheless, his comments did appear in the papers at the time. Was this the best since Heifetz? Asked Frankenstein after a 1948 performance of the Bartók Violin Concerto. Or was this just the best period? Well, there's no way that he is a superior player to Heifetz, but the fact that he was being likened to Heifetz shows his calibre. Following Spivakovsky's New York performance of the Violin Concerto by Giancarlo Menotti, a review appearing in the May 3, 1954 edition of Time stated, "As always, his tone was luxuriant, his pitch impeccable, and he brought the music to full-blooded life." The same article referred to Spivakovsky as one of the most brilliant violinists alive. Spivakovsky was soloist in the performance premiere of Leon Kirchner's Sonata Concertante and David Diamond's Canticle and Perpetual Motion. These are pieces I need to check out. I've never actually heard them before, so I will do that. Accompanied by the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, he gave the New York premieres of violin concerti by Frank Martin and Carl Nielsen. He composed his own cadenzas for the Beethoven Violin Concerto that were published in 1964 by Breitkopf and Hertel, Wiesbaden. I wonder if many soloists today perform the Beethoven using the Spivakovsky cadenzas. He also composed cadenzas for all 5 Mozart violin concerti that were published in 1967 by Wilhelm Zimmermann in Frankfurt am Main. For more than 4 decades, represented by Columbia Artists Management, he travelled extensively throughout the US, Canada, South America, Israel and Europe, giving solo performances. He also found time to teach violin and chamber music at the Juilliard School in New York City from 1974 to 1989. In order to draw from his instrument the richest, most brilliant tone possible, Spivakovsky developed an innovative method of bowing that was described in detail in a book entitled The Spivakovsky Way of Bowing by Gaylord Yost. Why is this video full of very strange names? I don't know. In a lifelong effort to perform his repertoire just as the composers wished their music to be performed, he sought and researched their original sheet music. When he made the discovery that Bach wanted certain chords in his solo violin works played without arpeggiation, he wrote an article entitled Problem of Arpeggiation in Bach's Music for Solo Violin that was published in the February 1954 issue of Musical America. A later article by Spivakovsky entitled Polyphony in Bach's Works for solo violin, published in 1967 in the Music Review Volume 28, Number 4, provides the evidence for Bach's preference. Upon hearing in 1957 a recording by Emil Temanye of Bach's works for solo violin played with a curved bow, Spivakovsky purchased a VEGA Bach bow from the Knud Vestergaard of Denmark for himself. Using the curved bow for Bach enabled him from then on to execute the whole 4-string chords of the Bach sonatas and parties with greater ease and sonority. In a spoken introduction to his live performance of the Chaconne, now released by Do Re Mi, Spivakovsky explained his motivation for the use of the curved bow. And he developed a way of holding the bow above the frog in order to execute solid rather than arpeggiated chords in Bach's solo violin suites. The Spivakovsky Way of Bowing by Gaylord Yost, 1949, describes this rather unorthodox method. Spivakovsky played a 1721 Stradivarius. Tossy was particularly renowned for his interpretations of Tchaikovsky and Sibelius. At the time of his brother Yasha's death in Turek, the pair were planning to record Beethoven's violin and piano sonatas. And let's quote from the Naxos description here of his performances. Aside from its historical significance as the first studio recording of the work, Spivakovsky's 1947 Bartók Violin Sonata No. 2 is a compelling account. Something of the immediacy is lost in this rather dim recording, but there is a thoughtfulness here, garnished with a tone notable for its clarity and intensity, aptly demonstrated at the beginning of this seminal work. These qualities apply equally well to his 1954 Bartók Violin Concerto No. 2 under Monteau. As with many of Spivakovsky's generation, the portamento is still in evidence, while the vibrato is fast and light. Comparisons with Heifetz's sound in contemporary comment are deserved and characterised his Menotti recording of 1955. The work illustrates the composer's eclectic yet fundamentally conservative style and became popular following Zimbalist's 1952 premiere. The vibrant first movement with its movements of humour is well conveyed by Spivakovsky's bright sound. In this work, especially the style of his portamento can be heard with its considerable similarity to that of Heifetz. The slow movement is soulfully rendered with plenty of time and space. So that concludes my short video on Tossy Spivakovsky.